Hello, everyone, and welcome to Be Bold, Fierce, Unstoppable. I'm your host, Zach Lyotis. In today's podcast, we have the beautiful Kristen Brown. She's a spiritual and empowerment life coach, author, and host of the Sweet Empowerment podcast, Reclaim Your Personal Power. Kristen believes if you don't change the way you show up in relationships, your relationships won't change. She is the author of The Recovering People Pleaser, a spiritual guide to reclaim your worth, embrace your true self, to break free from unhealthy relationship patterns. She is the creator of Self-Love to Soulmate Masterclass, a 6-week laser-focused program to break free from unhealthy relationship patterns by resetting your self-worth, releasing unconscious blocks, and unlocking your true self to attract and create a soulmate experience. Kristen is certified and advanced in spiritual coaching. She's an energy reader, empath, and intuitive who's studied human nature and relationships for over 30 years. Kristen takes special pride in openly sharing her personal journey with anyone who's ready to heal. Welcome, Kristen, to the show.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited to have you on here. After I read a few pages of your book, I was just like, holy Jesus. How is this girl going to make it through what she just literally put herself through?
Right.
Because we put ourselves through everything. But take us back. There's so many parts I want to talk about, like the pre-Kristen story compared to where you are today. But take us back to that point where you stopped or you quit your hairstyling business to become a full-time mom because you were in this relationship with someone and he had a child, you had a child. Did you guys both have a child? I can't remember that.
I had 2 and then we had one together.
One together. Okay, that was right.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he just kind of went Ghostbusters on you after
He
that.
sure did.
Bring us back to that time.
Okay, so this was my second marriage, and he was an aspiring pilot at the time that I met him, and he later became a pilot with overseas. So he was flying for a gentleman in Africa. So he was gone 5 and 6 weeks at a time and then home like 5 weeks. So basically I was single momming it. We, again, because I'd done that intermittently throughout my entire mom career. And at some point, well, let me think where we're going to go with this. So I was overwhelmed. I had 2 middle schoolers and I had this little toddler, and I was working full time and I was just exhausted. So at some point he says, why don't you stop working and you can just focus on the kids? And I was like, okay, that sounds amazing. It was a big, scary, tear-filled, I did hair. I dropped out of college to go to hair because my dad would pay for everything. He's like, go to college. And I called him one day and said, Dad, I just really want to do hair. And I'd wanted to do hair since I was in 6th grade. So this was my passion. This is something that I was really good at. I really loved, and I love people. And so quitting that, retiring is really what I told people was very difficult and scary for me because it's something that I loved my whole life, but I was exhausted and I was like, okay, this is time. So I quit. I retired from doing hair, and then you give away your entire clientele. I mean, they're rehoused, and that's just how hair works. People don't jump around. Once they get reestablished, they don't come back. So several months into this, I get Skyped on the road where he says, I'm going to move out when I get home. And I said, okay. The backstory is there was a lot of disruption. There was a lot of things that were going on that were extremely difficult to deal with regarding him. This did not surprise me. The part of me that's in touch with wounded folk and how they show up in the world, I kind of knew what was happening, but I also knew that this was okay, but yet not okay, because it was okay that he was leaving. I wasn't missing that. But here I was now incomeless with 3 children. We had a $700,000 house because that was at the height of the income or the housing market here in 2009 or whenever that was. Yeah. And I wasn't going to be able to afford any of this by myself at all because I had given away my clientele, and this is all I had done for 19 years. So I had no skill that I could lean on other than doing hair, but you have to rebuild your clientele. And you basically, if anybody knows how this works, you sit there all day long hoping for a walk-in, and then you rebuild that clientele slowly. It can take some time. So I was basically screwed. and very, very scared, because my absolute highest value in the world, it makes me tear up just thinking, going back to that space, was the safety and security of my children. And it was threatened in a way that I was like, my hands were tied. I had no idea what I was going to do, because I could go to Starbucks and get a minimum wage job, but that would not cover the bills. That would not take care of everything. So I was going to lose my house. And I virtually became homeless, but I didn't become homeless because my parents, my mom and my stepfather, decided to take us in, which worked out good.
Yeah, like I when I was reading your story, I really felt like I wanted to tear up for you. I was just like, I actually felt every word just going through my body. And I visualized like that your story was written so perfect because I was able to visualize it. And when you're going through it, I thought, oh my God, like, how is she going to deal with all this? Like, she just, I say she gave away her career at the same time, right? Because you're like so willing to say, okay, I'll retire and I'll take care of the kids while you do what you love to do, and I'll take care of the rest. So it was like that support system. But I want to ask you this question, because as women, we tend to ignore the red flags. We always say, oh, they were there, right? They were there. So let's talk about the red flags, because I want every woman to understand that if you're ignoring the red flags, you could be in the situation right now. So let's talk about the red flags. What were some red flags that you kind of ignored?
Well, the biggest one that stands out to me right off the top was about 2 weeks in to dating him. At this time, he lived at the Grand Canyon. He was doing air tours for the Grand Canyon. I lived in Scottsdale, Arizona, so that's pretty far apart. Yeah. And he something happened, some story where I caught him in a lie. And when I called him out on the lie, because there is that part of me that is fierce already. Like, I'm not afraid to say, hey, that's a lie. But the way he reacted was by calling me, I don't know if we're allowed to cuss on here.
Do whatever you want.
Okay, but he called me a fucking bitch for calling him out. And to me, now in hindsight, that's a red flag. But where I was at in my life at that time was name calling was almost normalized for me. It didn't stand out as it kind of did. I mean, my spirit knew, like, it was that, but my brain was like, yeah, you're kind of, you can handle that. That's no big deal. He was in a bad mood, or whatever. And I kind of discounted that. And then there was other things along the way that he was doing that I'm not sure would make sense to everybody because they were so intermeshed in our story. But one time I was picking him up when he was getting his flight training this is when he was trying to train for like 747, get his type rating. And he would come out and jump in the car, because I was picking him up one day because we were down to one vehicle, one was being fixed. And he kept looking behind him and wanting me to rush out of the parking lot. And I'm like, what? Well, I later determined there's one girl in the class with him. And I think he was kind of selling himself in a way to her and didn't want her to know that he was in this relationship. So there was just these kind of little things that were coming up. Drinking, he had, in my opinion, drank too much. And, slurring your words on a Wednesday night at 8:00 does not work for me. That indicates something. So there was just all kinds of little things. His backstory never made sense to me. There was just things that were like, but being the overgiving, compassionate, I will save you, I love you, I'm so great, I'm all the love you need, you're going to be fine type person. That was all hyphenated in between.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just kept pushing that stuff away because he was a charming Charlie. He's extremely charming. He's very intelligent. He was funny, great storyteller. And so I just kept ignoring those things. But now on this side of healing, those are massive red flags. And that's one of the things that I teach people as they try to discount those things. I'm like, do not discount those. Those matter. They're indicators. Do not discount them. Do not make it like they're nothing, because there's something.
It's so interesting that you say that. And because I'm getting back into the dating scene. I've been out and I go in and I go out and I go in, I have these things. And I was speaking to someone on the weekend and I was asking them a bunch of questions because I'm not going to waste my time. I just don't have time to waste on this stuff anymore. So then I gave him my number and he says to me right off the bat, I was wondering when you're going to stop busting my balls.
I
And I
was
was like,
wondering when you're going
when
to
you would
stop.
stop busting my balls.
Interesting.
And I was like, pardon?
Mm-hmm.
And he said it again. And I said, wow, you don't even know me. And I'm busting your balls already because I'm asking you questions to get to know you. And
There
the
it is.
old me would have been like, whatever. And this me was like, yeah, I don't appreciate anyone talking to me like this, because if I'm busting your balls now, you don't even know me. I could
Mm-hmm.
imagine what I'm going to do in 2 weeks from now.
Mm-hmm.
And right away, I said to myself,
Mm-hmm.
red flag. And I'm not ignoring these red flags anymore. I'm not going to be that people pleaser. You talk about it in your book as the doormat,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm not going to be that person anymore. And he says, so do you still want to get together? I said, this will never work out. Have a good day. But what made me laugh to myself after that, because we're so programmed to say, I'll talk to you later. I said, have a good day. I'll talk to you later. And I hung up the phone. I'm like, who's talking to who later?
Right.
Right.
Well,
So
good for you.
yeah, I was like, I'm not taking this anymore. I really got into like, no, this is what I want. There's unnegotiable situations that a man could be from the beginning, and I'm not going to fall for this. Once I see one red flag, I'm gone. There's no 1 strike, 2 strike, 3 strike. It's done.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say to every woman out there that ignores these red flags and continues being the people pleaser, nurturer, I could change him, I love him, he loves me type of a situation?
I would say, is the pain worth it? Is the
Mm.
pain worth it? Because if it is, then you're going to keep doing it. At some point that you have to decide for yourself that I can't put myself through that anymore. When you go backwards and you do the math and you pay attention to what you allowed in the past and what outcomes came from that, you're going to recognize a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And that pattern will continue because you're coming from the same level of thinking that created those patterns. So what we need to do is decide for ourselves that we are worth more than that. I didn't know what it was going to look like on the other side of this healing. I didn't know how this was going to happen. All I knew was that was not okay with me anymore. He also I've had an affair. I think I should add that in there. He had an affair in the middle of all this, which is why he ended up leaving, which he ended up cheating on his affair while she was pregnant. So it, you know, he has a stack of ish that he needs to work through. But it's super important, I feel, that there's a saying that goes, when you're going to help me with this because I always mess it up. When the fear when the fear of change outweighs pain or something like that. How does that go? When the pain outweighs the fear of change.
When the pain outweighs the fear of change. Yes.
Okay. So when we're in so much pain and we're like, this is so heavy, I just can't do this anymore, but
Yeah.
I'm scared to go there.
Yeah.
When this pain is way heavier than that fear, that's when you literally pivot in your life. Boom. Your trajectory has changed in that moment. I want something different.
Yeah. Yes. Amen to that. I gotta give it an amen.
We got to
Amen.
do an
That's how
amen.
I felt when I said to that guy, I'm not going on a date with you.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's absolutely the truth. That's a total amen moment right there.
Yeah.
So when you were going through this, so now you sold the house, moved in with your parents, what's the first thing that Kristen did? Because I mean, now you have a lot of processing to do when you're going through that.
Well, I will tell you that I'm someone who worked since I was 15. I had a great credit rating. You know, I'm not someone that ever relied on other people financially. So this was a hit for me. Very loving family. So we were very accepted, big house, we had space. My mom allowed me and my stepdad allowed me to change one of the rooms into a salon. So I was able to start rebuilding my clientele at home without having to pay rent at a salon and whatnot. So I was, I could keep that money. It was very, very difficult for me because I like my privacy. I like my quiet. I need my recharge time. I'm talking an Italian deaf stepfather with Walker, Texas Ranger blaring all day long through the house, crumbs everywhere because the two of them ate bread like it's nothing, My mom had an open door. So we're talking people come and stay in the, all kinds of stuff happening. And I was just in my room a lot. But the blessing, many, many blessings, but I'll just mention two. One, my mom had cancer for 10 years. So I was able to spend 5 solid years with her in the end of her life and be her backbone, be her strength, and she even said to me, she said, I know why you're here. You're here to help me get my soul straight before I die. That's another emotional moment.
Oh, wow, that's deep.
It was deep. And she was very woo-woo. And, but what I did was I had more free time than I'd ever had. And at first I fought that free time. I was like, kicking and screaming in my head. I'm always alone. This happens. This is terrible. Why is my life like this? And I was fighting it really, really hard. And then I said one day, literally driving to the grocery store, I said, you have always wanted free time. You've been a single mom for decades. You have always wanted free time. You've got it now. Because my mom and my youngest were BFFs. And so she loved having her there. And I could go do things that I needed to do. And I'm not talking bars or men. I swore off men, bars, not that I was a bar person, but you know what I'm saying, going out and mingling.
Yeah, I know.
I absolutely decided to remain single and celibate until I figured this pattern out. I knew something was wrong. And I said, I cannot have the distraction of another man in my life because obviously all my attention goes to him. How can I make him happy? And I lose myself in the process. So I just set to work to heal myself. And I read. I have a huge bookshelf full of books. I studied. I meditated like a crazy person. I hiked by myself. And as my healing started to happen, and I think this is a good point to make, is there was never a fanfare, a marching band with fireworks when my healing happened. It was just this slow progression into watching myself do something different. I just noticed one day that I was not responding, reacting. My old pattern was broken. My lens had changed and I started to see the world differently. And in that moment, I literally stopped foyer of my mom's house and I said, oh my God, something's happening here. And I pat myself on the back. I said, you're killing it, girlfriend. Keep going, keep going. And that's a tool that I teach my clients to this day. You have to pat yourself on the back. You have to hug yourself. You got to tell yourself that you're killing it. Any small, tiny win. That win, Zach, was me literally not texting somebody back who was being nasty. I just went, pfft. Where the old me, the fired up ego would have had to prove I was right and and make sure this person knew. And I just was like, yeah, not even going to go there.
Isn't it the most liberating feeling when you feel like you don't have to prove yourself to anyone or anything or any situation? Like that is the most liberating feeling that I've ever experienced in my life. Like when I just kind of look at them like, I know where you're trying to take me.
Yeah.
Not today.
100%.
Not today. I'm not in the mood for that.
No, I'm not in the mood.
Yeah.
I love that.
I've been through enough already. I don't even want to deal with this nonsense now. You got to do your own healing. I'm not doing it for you.
Right. That's it right there.
Yeah. Everyone has to go through their own healing. So I like that you said once you separated that you didn't have another relationship. You didn't have this rebound thing going on, right? You took care of Kristen because you had to figure out what the patterns were. What would you say to those women that, jump from one relationship to the other relationship and they're dating that same person just with a different name?
Right. Right. I would tell them it's time to stop looking outside of yourself for love, acceptance, and approval. Because in essence, when we're doing that, when we're jumping, we're just trying to fill a void inside of ourselves, period. Yeah. We're just trying to fill a void. And if somebody can love me, then I can feel okay. And if someone can accept me, then I can feel okay. The problem with that is we always show up to relationships needy or desperate. Now, those terms are seen as negative, needy and desperate. I want to normalize those terms. This is a human experience. This is not you're broken. There's anything wrong with you. this is part of our path, because we're all needy and desperate in some way. Because as we grow through life and the world, whether it's from parents or family or clergy or books or the neighborhood kids, starts to point at us in ways that tells us that we're not okay, we start believing them, and our worthiness cup empties, because we come here whole and perfect. As you know, we're whole and perfect when we come here. And then what we think is the world takes that away from us. So we believe that we have to get this back from the world. And so we look, and how can I adjust myself? I was the queen of morphing. I could morph into any situation I needed to morph into to blend and to be accepted, which is what's called losing ourselves. And I was accepted and blended in areas, but that true me kept coming out. That true me kept wanting to come out. So understanding that nobody can fill you up. Nobody can fill you up. First of all, you're whole and perfect just as you are, with all your faults, all your flaws. You are a spirit. You're beautiful. There's nothing wrong with you. We're divinely made just as you are. Every little piece of you is perfect. So when you can start to do that within yourself, is to love and accept and to cherish and to protect. And I mean protect in a healthy way. I don't mean guarded and armored. I always have to distinguish, because a lot of people think, well, I'm just protecting myself. No, you're armoring. You've got a wall around your heart that you're not letting love in or love out. So, but when you're self-protecting, you're more aware of what's happening around you and how people are treating you. And you're like, I'm going to remove myself from that energy. Or, if this is not a bad person, but their vibe bothers me, or they bring me down when I'm in their presence, or they're not kind, or whatever it is, we start to protect and love ourselves. We literally position ourselves in the best possible way for a relationship. Because let's be real, we're all humans here, all of us. We're fallible. We make mistakes. We have our wounds. We got our backstories. We've got our limited beliefs and things going on inside of us. And so you put two of those together, there's going to be some friction. If there's not friction, I'm concerned, because someone's being a people pleaser or an accepting or a doormat, or I don't want conflict or whatever. Conflict is healthy. Conflict isn't the problem. But the problem is when we're unwilling to work through those things. They're going to happen. But are you going to show up in an energy of neediness and desperation? Or this can also manifest as completely armored and guarded. So the fear, the unworthiness shows up in one way or the other. And it can vacillate, like people can move between the two. And it's also a spectrum. So if you're needy, you could be the totally way over there needy, that just anything goes, or you could be kind of, it depends where you're at. I don't think I was completely over the top. I was never the guarded armored person, but I've dealt with a lot of the guarded armored people. So when you learn to love, accept, and cherish yourself, and this sounds so cliche these days, but there's so much power in this. This is literally the miracle that can befall your life, is when you do this, you show up in a way in relationships that is calm. It's centered. You see it clearly. You know what's theirs and you know what's yours. And you take responsibility for yours, and you shift and move and morph and heal a little bit more of yourself. You're peeling back the layers of your onion. Because am I done, Zach? I am not done. I am not done until I'm dead. I grow continuously, and I'm constantly looking at myself rather than other people. If I'm having a discord with someone, yes, I'm going to recognize that their behavior is crappy, or they're being this, they're being that. But I say, okay, I can't change them.
Yeah.
What can I do for me in this moment? How can I adjust myself that can bring a different dynamic into the current situation? And let me tell you something, that's where the power is.
Amen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The power is in the communication with self. The power is in self-love. And I remember years ago when I was in California, and I said to Spirit, why am I always being hurt? Why do men always hurt me? And they said, because you're guarding yourself. So when you're saying that, it's interesting, because we do get hurt more when we guard ourselves. And so I remember saying to Spirit, and this was so cliche, because I heard, how can I heal through this? And I would hear, love yourself. And I'm like, what?
Right.
Like, is this for real? Like, I go, that just sounds so cliche. Like, love yourself. Okay, what's the answer to pain? Love. Okay, how do you want me to do that? And Spirit would actually tell you, like, take down, like take off the shackles, take down the barriers, take down whatever you're holding in your heart, and just accept love for what it is. And your inner being will protect you. Your inner being will tell you, hey, that's a red flag. Your inner being will say, hey, open your eyes to that. Your inner being will always be there for you. So when you're saying that, like it's cliche, the whole love thing, I totally agree with you. But at the end of the day, the greatest answer to anything is to love yourself. The greatest answer to healing any pain or suffering and creating boundaries, people pleasing, we're going to talk about the doormat in a second, is really about self-love.
100%.
And until we start to love ourselves, no one is going to love us the way we really need to be loved.
100%.
So I totally agree with you on that one. Let's talk about the doormat, because that really, when I was reading about it in the book, I was like, girl, you have check that off. Yep, I went through that. Check that off. Yep. And I thought to myself, girl, you've been a doormat for way too long. So define the doormat, what the doormat is, so people fully understand that. And you guys could get the book. It's an incredible book, The Recovering People Pleaser. But we're going to talk about the doormat right now, because those people pleasers are a doormat in more ways in relationships, not only in a love relationship with a partner, whoever your partner is, but in relationship with friends, coworkers, anybody. This doormat situation could be you in your life. So there's an awakening moment that's going to come on here. I don't know if I'm saying this too, but I could feel it already happening.
Right. Well, people pleaser and doormat are kind of synonymous with each other. I really play them back and forth. I think people pleaser falls easily on other people's ears because people don't really want to claim doormat. Okay. Was I a huge doormat? Did I allow people to shit all over me left and right? Absolutely not. I grew up with 4 brothers. I'm a tough cookie. I'm willing to speak up. However, when it came to certain situations, I was not willing to set limits where needed. So basically, you are allowing behavior to happen to you that you should not allow. Whether it's someone raising their voice at you, or you're a server in a restaurant and the other server keeps taking the walk-ins, whatever it might be. It's any time that you are not getting treated the way that you should be treated. Now, I know a lot of people don't like the word should, but here's what I mean by that is you deserve a level of respect and honor, as does everybody else in this world. And we are the only ones that can say to somebody, that's okay, or that's not okay. That's acceptable, or that's not acceptable. And I see a lot that people will be like, oh yeah, this is happening in my relationship. And my first question is, have you told them? And they say, well, no. And I say, so wherever you're not speaking up, you are literally accepting the behavior. So I found over and over and over again, the hardest part for people is to literally learn to speak up. So it's really about finding our voice and upholding a standard for ourselves. And what I've noticed with people that are extremely people pleasing and doormatty, a lot of people are afraid they're going to look like a bitch or a jerk or some kind of a-hole if they stand up for themselves. So they're so afraid to do it because, remember, they want to get the love. So if I'm setting a boundary with you, oops, I might piss you off. Well, here's the thing. You're actually giving yourself the love. You're filling your own cup when you say, that is not okay with me. And there is always risk in personal development. There always is. But here's what I've noticed to be true, that each time that I spoke up for myself, and I need to talk about that because there's about holding the line too. It's not just about speaking up, but each time that I spoke up for myself, I inside felt protected. I felt loved. I felt I was giving me what I needed. And many, many times, now it depends if you're dealing with a narcissist or someone who's, has some sort of personality disorder or an addict. Addicts that fall into that category too. If you're speaking to a normal human being, I would say normal, that's not a good word, but you get what I'm saying. Someone that doesn't have a personality disorder or an addiction. They're most often willing to hear you because guess what? They love you too. They're in your life because they love you too. And a lot of times you're like, holy moly, I didn't know that bothered you. I'm so sorry. And then there's times when they're not. They're like, well, they want to turn that around on you and gaslight you. That's where it gets a little bit challenging, which goes into my next point of it's not, excuse me, enough to just set the boundary. It's not enough to just speak up. There needs to be follow through. So I talk about this a lot. I think I have an 8-part boundary series on my podcast, if anybody's interested, because I go through all these things that can happen. There's also some things on my YouTube, but we often have to follow word boundaries with action.
Yeah.
So if the boundary's not working, if you have made a request, now here's what's interesting, because people pleasers, you got to tell us once, don't do that. We're like, and we stop doing it. I mean, it's done, right? We're not going to do that again because you were hurting your feelings. We're hyper aware of how other people are perceiving us. And we want people to be happy too. I mean, there's a great side of this too. But sometimes they don't heed what we're asking, and they keep doing it. Okay, well, then there has to be a follow-up, a consequence to that. So this is funny, but when I was training my pup, because he was a crazy mofo, I mean, he was tough. My first one was so easy. Just I could use a word and he would go do whatever I said. I never even had to train this puppy. This one was crazy. And I had to be very consistent. I had to praise the good behavior, and there needed to be a consequence to the bad behavior. I'm not talking beating, hitting, anything physical, because I got trainers involved. And here's what they said. If he keeps coming into the kitchen while you're cooking, put his leash on and secure him to the post on the railing of the stairs or something. There's a consequence to him to him continuing to come into my kitchen. You see what I'm saying? I don't need to get mean. I don't need to get bitchy. I don't need to yell and scream. I do not need to step out of my peace. I just need to remain calm, assertive, which is a wonderful Cesar Millan term, which I just love. When he said that, I'm like, that's the same with people.
Yeah.
So this is really what it boils down to. And when I was training him at the facility, the woman said to me, I said, well, this is like people training. She goes, oh yeah. She goes, dog training, people training. It's kind of the same thing. Now people wouldn't like that because like, oh, you're treating me like a dog. That's not the point. The point is it's consistency, even with your children, whoever it is that you are trying to train in a healthier way. It's going to take consistency, and it's going to take consequences and praise.
It's all about teaching, right? It's all about teaching your higher self how to show up.
Yeah.
It's all about it's like that dog. My dad always said dogs are like humans. Dogs are humans. And we were embedded as kids that, you know what, a dog, sometimes he'd say dogs are smarter than humans. Look at them. They know how to do things better than humans. I would kill myself laughing, right? Because these days I think dogs are humans, period, when they do stuff. But it's really about teaching that higher self to come out and play on a different level. And if we don't teach our dogs and we don't teach our kids and we don't really work with that wisdom within ourselves, we're going to be stuck on this realm that isn't going to be serving us. And that's when we lose a sense of that self-love, I feel, more than anything. Because if you don't love yourself, you are going to be that doormat to anything and everything that's going to come in. So what does self-love mean to you these days?
Well, you just brought up a good point first that I want to address. You're talking about getting in touch with your higher self. 100% amen. Rock on, sister. That's exactly right. Because when we're in this fear, which is what people pleasing is, a fear. Okay. It's just the bottom line fear. That's all it is. When we're in that fear is what? It's our ego. So when we are in that lower self, our fear, our ego / lower self, then we are functioning in a way that is not serving to us. But like you said, when we switch over to our higher self, our God self, our divine self, then we do allow the wisdom to flow in our relationships, which brings us a better result. Because anything of God, of love, of higher power, of source, whatever you call the force, anything of love is always correct. It's always correct. It is capital T truth. So when I know I'm functioning from a place of love, even if it's setting a boundary where people are like, oh, well, I don't feel like that's very loving. I'm like, okay, number one, you're loving you. You are loving you. That is the place you want to be in. Because when you're loving you, it's not wrong. Believe me, to this day, 53 years old, I remind myself of this when I'm setting a boundary. I'm like, this is of love. This is going to be serving in the entirety of the picture. It's the best for everybody concerned. not just me, because we're also giving our person an opportunity to look deeper within themselves and to figure some things out for themselves, sans someone like a narcissist or an addict. And I say those because I've had run-ins with both of those. And I know you're talking to a wall. Unless they have some big, huge spiritual awakening, probably no boundary is going to break through with them.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
so what does self-love mean to me now? Is that what you asked?
Yeah.
Okay. So self-love to me is not a bath. That's self-care. Walking is self-love to me. It is things that serve my highest good, which is the way I talk to myself. How do I talk to myself and treat myself? That's self-love. It is, am I taking care of protecting and honoring my highest self at all times? That's self-love. Am I supporting myself? Am I being kind to myself? The other day, it was like a month, a year ago, I don't know. I got out of the shower. I have mirrors right in front of the door. I came out of the shower and I went, looked at my naked body and I go, oh my God, you look just like blank. I won't say who. And I was like, Kristen, how dare you? Don't talk to yourself like that. And I'm saying that lovingly, how dare you? Because that's kind of my wake me up.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, sister. You stand here and you look at yourself until you are convinced how beautiful you are. And I said, look at that body that's housed 3 babies. Look at that. Look at those scars from when you broke your leg. Look at how you made it through these times, blah, blah, blah. And what happens is that's an act of self-love. What happens is that fear-based thought just trickles away. And next thing you know, I'm on my grocery list.
Yeah.
It just kind of edges it out. Okay. And this takes practice because people are like, well, I've done that before and it doesn't work. That's okay. That's okay. There could be a lot involved. We don't know what's involved. Everybody has backstories.
Yeah.
So that is really what how you talk to yourself. Do you forgive yourself? I have gotten into the practice. I talked about it in the book. You probably read that, where I forgive myself. I give it to the universe. I'm like, help me see this correctly next time. Help me stop that behavior before it happens. Let me be more aware. Let me slow down this thing. I forgive myself immediately, because to hold ourselves hostage with unforgiveness and beating ourselves up, is that love?
Yeah.
Would you beat up a baby or a puppy? We have to be gentle with ourselves at all time. We're works in progress. We're fallible. Understanding that we are not perfect. Huge message that we all have to get. I tried to be perfect. That was part of my backstory. I tried to be perfect. I don't even think that's in my book. And boy, that never worked. I was always reaching for the carrot that I was never going to get. It just was forever out of reach. And finally I said, this blows. This is for the birds. This feels like crap. I hate every minute of this. I'm going to embrace being imperfect. So part of self-love is embracing being imperfect. And it's also grace, the beautiful word grace, 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 that I had to really learn the definition of, because we hear it all in the world, all over the place. But through my journey, I looked up many terms because I was like, what does this actually mean? So where I implemented grace in my life was, you're okay. You're okay. Every step of this journey, you are okay. You are doing the best you can. I'm so proud of you. That's grace. Giving yourself grace for making mistakes and for being a work in progress. This is all self-love. When we treat ourselves like that, it is mind-blowing how we will start to show up in the world. We take things less personally. Because we give ourselves forgiveness and grace, guess what we give to other people? More forgiveness and grace. Because the judgment on self, we always project out.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to speak about the perfectionism, because I remember when I first started doing this spiritual work, when I was called to do the work. I mean, I've been called to do this work since I was 3 years old. I think,
I believe
I
it.
ran away with it for many years because, I
believe
was told it was bad. But anyhow, beyond that, but I had someone say to me, Zach, I'm a perfectionist. And right away came out of my mouth, to whom? And she says, what do you mean, to whom? And I said, well, who are you perfectionist to? Because you're perfect. Maybe he's not perfect to me. So who are you perfectionist to? And she goes, what do you mean?
Exactly.
Everything I do has to be perfect. And I said to her, well, I think you really need to tame from that word perfectionist. She's like, well, at work, I'm a perfectionist. I make sure like, my I's are dotted and my T's are crossed, and I make sure this, and I make sure that. And I said, good for you, girl. Good for you. But you're being perfection to you, not to anyone else. So she comes into my office, I think it was 3 days later, and she's crying. And I said to her, what are you crying? Like, what's wrong? She's like, when you're talking about perfectionism. And I said, yeah. She goes, well, I had my, what do they do at work? Like 3 month review or 1 year review or something like that. I said to her, how did it go? And she goes, my boss told me that my work is the shittiest work that he's ever seen. Yeah, like literally. And I literally start laughing. I couldn't even stop myself from laughing. And I said to her, who are you perfect for? Because that was the first question I asked you when you told me that you're a perfectionist. So they didn't hire her full time after that. They had her on another 3-month probation because she was so upset. She wanted the job so bad. She goes, seriously, maybe I should look into myself a little deeper. And I said, yeah. I said, there's perfect and imperfect. I said, you have to remember that because there's always growth when you think it's imperfect. But when you think it's perfect, I said to her, you're putting your blinders on and not looking at a different perspective to grow from there.
Mm-hmm.
And I never seen her after that day. Because I
I
had an open door policy to come, like people used to walk in my office at that time and just walk in and say, hey, can I ask you a question? I'd be like, yeah, come, sure, go ahead. So I had that. And so she came in, she goes, I was called here by spirit. And I said, well, there was a message for you there, and this is what it comes down to. A lot of people have this, oh, I want that perfect body, or I have that perfect health. And at the end of the day, you really have to tap into what does perfect mean to you? Because it doesn't mean that to me at the same time. So as long as you're happy and you have that love for yourself, and that's perfect for you. But I want to talk about the mirror work that you did with your body, because I heard a beautiful thing today. And I was going through my own weight journey as well. I remember being in Mexico and I saw these girls with smashing bodies. And I was like, that girl's got a smashing body. And, I don't care who you are. If I have that you are hot situation going on, male, woman, anyone, I don't care. I'd be like, you're hot, And this girl, as she walked by her and her friends, I was like, man, these girls have some smashing bodies. And my spirit right away said to me, they're at the gym every day. Where are you? And I started laughing because I'm like, well, I'm eating all day long and I'm not paying attention and I'm not doing that. So when we look at that body, we're not realizing that everything that comes with it. But then I realized that self-talk with me was that, oh, you're fat, you're ugly, you'll never this. And I was a girl that was literally, I went from overweight to anorexia. Mm-hmm. And then I went to gaining weight again. And I never loved my body. And when I start loving my body, and I was like, I'm that person that wakes up and goes naked in the morning, looks in the mirror and goes, oh, we're coming there. We're getting there. Keep on going. Those roles are still there, but we're loving it. Right.
Yeah.
And the more that I did that, the more that I would look in that mirror, the more that I loved my body, the more healthier I would eat, the more I'd want to go for a walk, the more I would want to add other plans to make myself feel healthier within myself. Today I started a program, and I said to my body, I said, are you ready for this? Because you've been telling me you don't belong in this body, and I'm feeling that, but are you ready for what's next? So it's interesting when we forgive ourselves. Let's talk about self-forgiveness, because you have a big chapter of it in the book. So it's for people, I'm not going to forgive him, right? Let's talk about what really self-forgiveness is and who you're really forgiving at the end of the day.
Well, I think forgiveness is a huge part of our journey, because it's just basically toxic energy that we're hanging on to that's keeping us tied and tethered to somebody else. Yeah. So I'm going to start with that first, with other people. And forgiveness to me is not condoning. And once I believe that people understand that it's not condoning, you're not saying what they did is okay. Something a girlfriend did to me way back in high school to this day still upsets me. It's not cool. When someone does something not cool, even if you hear the story 30 years later, it's still not cool. Not cool is not cool. But we can release the toxic tie to that person by, and I personally do this by understanding their wounded self. When I understand why they did what they did, And it had nothing to do with me. It had to do with exactly where they're at in that moment and what their ego was trying to gain in that moment. When I can understand what is happening with somebody else, that helps me to release that tie. But I will say that I do bring it to my higher power, because after my mother passed away, and big, long, huge story that's way too much for here, but it's not private, I would share, but it's too much. The stepsisters did some things that were very not cool. And I was angry, and I was angry and angry for probably a year. And I finally said, this is terrible. I can't even have this conversation without feeling my blood boil. And I had to take it to God. I had to take it to my higher power. And I said, I'm willing to forgive. And then I could feel this part of me resisting that said, no, you're not, because my ego still wanted to be right. And I said, okay, I'm willing to be willing. And just adding that little extra willing in there, I could do that. I could feel that within myself. I'm like, yeah, I can be willing to be willing. And then like the next day I tried it again. A lot of this happens in the shower. Just so y'all know, I do a lot of healing work in the shower and in my car.
I think that's everyone. Me too.
And I cried a lot at the gym. I let go of a lot of emotions. Weirdest thing, I'd have my earphones on and I'm just with me, and I'd cry a lot by myself at the gym and just sitting there bawling. I'm like, oh my God. But I let it come. So I did this in the shower. And then by the next day I said, I'm willing. And I said, okay, I can get on board with that now. I'm absolutely willing. And then I'm like, I'm really willing. And I pulled that in, and I kid you not, within like, I think the next week I thought about them, or they got brought up somehow. And I felt no dense energy. And that had been present for over a year. So I do believe that there are certain things that we can do, but we can also ask the universe, the energy. We're all connected, we're all one, and we can ask for assistance, because there is free will. And unless we ask for assistance, we can't get it, because the universe will not impose on us. So when you ask, please help me with this particular thing. Now, self-forgiveness, if I'm understanding your question, is it how to self-forgive?
Yeah, how to forgive, basically.
Yourself or others?
Others.
Oh, okay. So that's basically it, is that I understand. I also think in terms of this, and I had a meditation that I would bring a group through, and they all came out of it like, holy bejesus, that was amazing. And I had them picture ties around their waist that were attached to the next person that offended them, and then the tie to them to the person that offended them, and then the tie to them, and then generations back, because it's a pathology that, this keeps happening. So when we can cut the tie and have a visualization of cutting the tie with those people, and understanding that this person is, as A Course in Miracles would call it, is innocent. This is an innocent person doing the best they can. It looks really bad right now, but it is literally the best they can. And so when we can understand that this is the best it got for that person in this moment, it's really, really yucky and unacceptable, but it's the best it got for them. And we understand on a spiritual level, from one spiritual being to another, that that's really the best it got because of their backstory and their tethering to the next person.
Yeah.
We can cut that tie as well. And I have found so much freedom in forgiveness. Course in Miracles talks about quantum forgiveness. It's just like forgiving all day long, all day long, all day long. The person that cut you off, the person that was mean to you at the store. I can find myself when I'm in lower vibe days, defeated or whatever I'm feeling that's not good, and someone takes my order at the coffee shop and they didn't smile. I can feel myself like wanting to, what's up your butt, right? You can't smile. You're in a public arena, or something. And I hear it and I go, no, Kristen, really, just send love to that person.
Yeah. And
then I'm waiting for my coffee. I just blast them. I'm like, I don't want that ish. I don't want that energy. And the whole thing is energy. We're just healing energy, and we're being responsible for what we're giving out and what we are taking in.
Yeah, so beautifully said. I know we're coming to the end of the podcast, but can I ask you one more question? Do you have time for one more question?
Yes, I do.
Awesome. Let's talk about, there's two more questions, but I'm going to talk about taking back your power. Taking back your power. I think it's really important that people understand what it means to take back your power. So you went through a journey of your former husband going through that. And so how did you take back your power and be the Kristen you are today?
Okay. That's an awesome question. And because I think that term reclaim your personal power or taking back your power might seem kind of airy to people. Like they, they kind of, excuse me, with all this allergy stuff, they kind of get it, but they don't really get it.
Mhm.
The truth is, it's about taking responsibility for your life. All of it. All of it. How are you behaving? How are you allowing others to behave you? Where do you need healing? What do you need? I did not point the finger at my ex-husband and say, oh, just another person doing another crappy thing to me and sit in my victimhood. Although I did mention this in the book, you probably remember this, where I said I was dangling over an abyss so deep that if I fell into this abyss, that I'd be gone forever. That abyss was victimhood. So if I fell into that, pointing the finger blame, and let me tell you, it was tasty. This was hot fudge on ice cream with pound cake. It was so tasty to the ego to just want to point at him and tell my story to everybody. And what a jerk. And can you believe? And of course, everybody's going to get on board with this story. It was poo.
Yeah.
Because he also abandoned his daughter for 7 years. No,
Yeah.
not a word. Not a word. And I didn't, as I was writing that book, it had not been that amount of time yet, but it ended up being 7 years until he tried to come back into her life. So there was a lot of poo to the story. And I was sitting there and it was intoxicating, for lack of a better word. It felt like a drug to be in victimhood. Like I just want to be right. I didn't need to be right. I said, I need to break this pattern. I need to take responsibility of how I helped create this situation because I get to allow. And that's when I literally did this. This is part of the process of my self-love to soulmate course. Is I literally stood at the foot of my bed one day and by myself, and I said, where have you allowed this your whole life? Where have you allowed disrespect and dishonor? And I literally went through every romantic relationship. I was physically abused in 2 relationships. And one of them was the ex. I mean, he would grab me around the neck. He would do all kinds of things. But I went back through and I'm like, I allowed this. I did this. I did. And I listed them and I didn't judge them because we don't want to judge. We want to observe. Judgment does nothing. That fills your shame cup and it makes you not want to see. And I talk a lot about people. There's no shame in anything that we're learning and growing. We're humans. Let's put us all in the same bucket of messy humans doing life, clueless little babies, toddlers kicking. We don't know. We're just making a mess. We don't know until we start to want to know. So we're innocent. And so I went back through all my relationships and I literally made a list of every time that I disrespected or dishonored myself. Staying in the abusive relationship for 2 years from 17 to 19. I stayed. I gave away my power. So how do we take our power back? By going, I stayed in that and I shouldn't have. I also didn't tell anybody. Okay. I gave away my, no one knew until way after the fact. No one knew. Family didn't know. The guy almost strangled me to death in my parents' kitchen. No one knew. I never told a word. Never said a word. So reclaiming our personal power is about saying, I'm in charge now, and I am going to take responsibility now, period, for everything that happened to me. And I'm going to investigate why I did those things, which for me, it was unworthiness, needing love, like we talked about in the beginning of this episode, about needing love, thinking I needed to get the approval outside of myself. You know, I didn't want to be alone. So many of us don't want to be alone. We think that if we're coupled up, that we're valuable because, you know, that we have some vision around being single is crap when it really is not. And I'd taken responsibility and then I did the work to heal myself. And when we start to recognize our pattern, if any of the listeners today, just stop for a minute. If this is all resonating with you, just look at your pattern. And just in this moment, declare, I'm done. I'm done with that. I can't allow this in my life anymore. I am allowing this. And then give yourself a really big hug and say, it's okay. It's okay. Self-compassion is so important on this journey. It's like, it is literally hand in hand with the awakening. You're awakening to truth, but you're also loving yourself in a way you never have before. And everything shifts. It is miraculous.
So beautiful.
Thank you.
So beautiful. It is truly miraculous when you take back your power and take responsibility for every action you've taken. And like they say, you point one finger at someone for pointing right back at you.
Amen.
And at the end of the day, when you take back that power, you don't allow other people to mistreat you or disrespect you, because now
Yes, or it slows down the process, because
yeah,
at first I was like, is this what I'm seeing? And I needed to go to a friend and go, is that okay that this person, and they're like, no, that's not okay. I'm like, okay, I didn't think so, because I still was getting I was on training wheels. I was still trying to figure it out. But it
yeah.
does come easier.
It's a beautiful process when you become aware of the pattern. It's a beautiful process when you become aware of what you're accepting and not accepting anymore in a relationship, in a friendship, and with colleagues, just anyone in general, right? Just
Yeah,
relationship
it
in
is.
general. And it's such a beautiful thing when like how you said, take ownership of what happened in every relationship. Where were your patterns there? And stop beating yourself up because you went through that journey, because you were meant to go through that journey. You brought yourself through that journey to learn something about yourself. And the more that you are accepting of, okay, I went down this journey because I needed to learn about X, Y, and Z, then you open up a whole plethora of, I think I'm hearing a whole plethora of a new world within yourself.
Doesn't that feel good? Ooh, that feels so
Right?
good.
I know it is a hugging, self-hugging
It is.
moment. And I always say this to a lot of people, is that if we don't celebrate our small wins and love ourselves and hug ourselves, we're never going to recognize the bigger wins that we create within our life. So I love that you're saying like it's time to hug ourselves, because that self-compassion, that self-love, I mean, at the end of the day, means more, not only to ourselves, but how we allow others to come into our life, that your life just changes automatically. I know it's not going to be like in an hour or in a day or in a month, but a year is not that much time. We're almost done 2021 if we think about it.
I know, weird.
Yeah, we're almost done
Weird.
2021. So it's not that long. 1 year is not that long. In a blink of an eye, it like things change so quick. So Kristen, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. This was so beautiful. Like I said, the recovering people pleaser, I love it. This is my IF course. I printed my book out because I love it. But it's such a great book for anyone that you want to stop being a people pleaser. You want to stop being that doormat. In the show notes below, all of Kristen's links, social links are going to be in there. If you want to get in contact with Kristen, everything's going to be in there. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Please join us in the Empress Hangout on Facebook. It's a private Facebook group where we continue these conversations, and like us on Instagram. And don't forget to share, like, and leave us a comment in the show notes below. Until we connect again, have yourself a great day. Bye for now.
Thank you, Zach.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.